True courage is not the absence of fear, but compassion that conquers hatred. In the wild frontier, the greatest victories are won by those who choose mercy over violence. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Turner Ranch as Anne Elizabeth Turner adjusted her worn leather gloves. At 19, she had spent countless dawns like this one, but today felt different. The air itself seemed to whisper of change. Her father, William, emerged from the barn, his weathered face creased with concern. "Government men been asking questions in town," he said quietly, "about the Apache." Anne's mother, Rose, appeared on the porch, her hands twisted in her apron. The family had always treated the local tribes with respect, unlike their neighbors. "Land belongs to all who honor it," William had always taught his daughter, words that now seemed dangerous to speak aloud. Rose called them to breakfast, her voice strained. "Heard tell Colonel Blake's been given new orders," she said, setting down plates of cornbread and bacon. "Something about clearing the territory." Anne felt her stomach tighten. The Apache bands had been peaceful for months, yet rumors of military raids grew stronger each day. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows like an omen of troubles to come. After breakfast, Anne saddled her mare Copper and rode toward the eastern pasture where their cattle grazed. The Arkansas Valley stretched before her, beautiful and deceptive in its tranquility. She had grown up in this land, learned its moods and seasons. But now, federal policies threatened to tear apart the delicate balance her family had worked years to build. The Apache had been their neighbors, trading partners, sometimes even friends. "Why must everything change?" she whispered to the wind, knowing it held no answers. As she counted the cattle, Anne noticed fresh tracks near the waterhole, unshod horses moving fast. Her heart quickened. Someone had been here recently, someone fleeing. She dismounted and knelt beside the clearest print, her father's lessons in tracking serving her well. The depth suggested a wounded rider, the uneven gait of a horse carrying extra weight. Looking toward the distant mountains where the Apache traditionally made their camps, she made a decision that would change everything. She would ride out at dawn to investigate. Dawn was breaking over the Turner Ranch when Anne rode back from the pasture, her mind still troubled by the tracks she'd found. As Copper's hooves splashed through the creek near the waterhole, something caught her eye. A dark shape lay motionless beside the cattails. Anne's breath caught in her throat as she dismounted and approached cautiously. An Apache warrior, unconscious and badly wounded, lay bleeding into the muddy earth. His shoulder bore a deep gash, and his leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. Despite the danger this discovery posed to her family, Anne felt only compassion. "Easy now," she whispered, though the warrior couldn't hear her. Blood seeped through his buckskin shirt, and his breathing was shallow. Anne knew she had minutes to decide. Leave him to die, or risk everything to save a stranger's life. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "Healing knows no boundaries, child." With trembling hands, she checked his pulse. Strong, but fading. She looked toward the ranch house, then back at the dying man. "Lord, forgive me," she murmured, and began the difficult task of loading him onto her horse. The decision was made. The old forge behind the main house had been abandoned for years, its stone walls perfect for hiding her desperate act of mercy. Anne struggled to carry the unconscious warrior inside, her muscles straining against his weight. She fetched water, clean cloth, and her mother's medicinal herbs. As she worked to clean his wounds, the warrior stirred, dark eyes opening to stare at her with confusion and wariness. "I won't hurt you," she said softly. "You're safe here." He tried to speak but only managed a hoarse whisper. Anne pressed a cool cloth to his fevered brow, beginning a vigil that would last through the night. By morning, the warrior's fever had broken. He watched Anne with intelligent eyes as she changed his bandages, no longer afraid, but curious. "Eagle Claw," he said, in accented English, touching his chest. Anne smiled despite her exhaustion. "Anne Turner," she replied. When her parents discovered what she had done, the argument that followed shook the house. "You've put us all in danger," William thundered, but Rose placed a gentle hand on her husband's arm. "She did what was right," she said firmly. "We'll face whatever comes together." The family was united in their choice. though they all knew the risks were just beginning. 5 days had passed since Eagle Claw's arrival when dust clouds appeared on the horizon. Anne's heart sank as she recognized the blue uniforms of cavalry officers riding toward the ranch. Captain James Walker and Lieutenant Thomas Smith dismounted near the porch, their spurs jingling ominously. "Afternoon, Mr. Turner," Walker said, touching his hat brim. "We're investigating reports of suspicious activity in these parts." William's face remained impassive as he invited them to water their horses. "What kind of activity, Captain?" he asked. "Indian raids, cattle theft, the usual troubles that plague honest ranchers." Anne busied herself in the kitchen, every nerve on edge as she prepared coffee for the unwelcome guests. Through the window, she could see the old forge where Eagle Claw lay hidden. "We're hunting an escaped Apache," Lieutenant Smith announced, accepting a cup with thanks. "Dangerous warrior, possibly wounded. You folks seen anything unusual?" William's weathered hands remained steady as he poured his own coffee. "Nothing more than the usual coyotes and rustlers," he replied. "This ranch has been peaceful for months." Anne held her breath, praying Eagle Claw would remain silent and still. Captain Walker's eyes swept the ranch buildings with professional interest. "Mind if we take a look around?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. William nodded graciously. "Of course, Captain. Rose, why don't you show them our new dairy barn?" As her mother led the officers away, Anne slipped toward the forge. Eagle Claw was awake, his hand resting on a knife handle. "Soldiers," she whispered. He nodded grimly, understanding the danger. Together they waited in the dusty darkness, listening to the sound of boots approaching, then mercifully retreating as the search moved elsewhere. The inspection seemed to last forever. Walker questioned the family about their relationships with local tribes, their trading practices, and any strangers who might have passed through. William answered each query with practiced ease, steering the conversation toward cattle prices and weather conditions. "Well, Mr. Turner," Walker finally said, mounting his horse, "if you see anything suspicious, send word to Fort Carson immediately." After the soldiers disappeared down the valley trail, the family gathered in the kitchen. "They'll be back," William said grimly. "We need to get him to safety soon." Anne nodded, already planning their next move. Before dawn, Anne loaded supplies into her wagon while Eagle Claw, still favoring his wounded leg, climbed carefully onto the seat beside her. "Copper Hills," he said, pointing toward the distant mountains. "My people wait there." Anne nodded, guiding the horses away from the main road and into the winding canyon trails her father had shown her as a child. The rocky paths would hide their tracks and keep them away from military patrols. Eagle Claw watched the landscape with keen eyes, occasionally directing her toward hidden passages that only his people knew. The journey would be perilous, but it was their only hope. By midday, they reached the Picket Wire River, its waters running swift and clear between red canyon walls. Anne watered the horses while Eagle Claw rested in the shade, his strength slowly returning. "Why do you help me?" he asked suddenly. Anne considered her answer carefully. "Because it's right," she said simply. "My family believes all people deserve mercy." Eagle Claw studied her face with dark, intelligent eyes. "Your words are truth," he said, "but truth is dangerous in these times." The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted their conversation, and Anne's blood ran cold as 3 riders emerged from the canyon mouth. "Well, well," drawled the lead rider, a scarred man with cold blue eyes. "What have we here?" Anne's mind raced as Scott Ryder, Jack McBride, and Charlie Toms, notorious bounty hunters, dismounted near the wagon. "Just delivering medical supplies to the Henderson settlement," she said with forced calm, grateful that Eagle Claw had pulled his hat low and wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. "Mighty far from the usual trail, miss," McBride observed suspiciously. Anne's heart pounded as she fabricated details about sick children and desperate families. The bounty hunters exchanged glances, clearly unconvinced by her story. Just as the situation grew most dangerous, an old mountain man emerged from the rocks above. "Anne Turner," called Isaac Woodworth, his weathered face creasing into a grin. "Been wondering when you'd come through with those medicines. The Henderson boys' fever broke yesterday thanks to your ma's remedies." Anne nearly fainted with relief as the grizzled trapper approached. "These gentlemen bothering you?" he asked, eyeing the bounty hunters with obvious distrust. Ryder spat into the dust. "Just being neighborly, old man." Woodworth handed Anne a small pouch of supplies. "Safe travels, child. And tell your folks Isaac sends his regards." The bounty hunters, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, reluctantly mounted their horses and rode away. After 3 grueling days through rocky terrain and endless prairie, Anne and Eagleclaw found themselves surrounded by Apache warriors who seemed to materialize from the very stones. Painted faces and drawn weapons greeted them until recognition dawned in the warriors' eyes. "Eagleclaw!" they shouted joyfully, embracing their returned brother. Anne sat frozen on the wagon seat as curious eyes studied her. An older warrior approached, his weathered face serious. "You brought our brother home," he said in careful English. "Strong wind welcomes you." The temporary camp nestled in a protected valley, hidden from prying eyes by towering rock formations. Anne marveled at the efficient organization: women tending fires, children playing quietly, men crafting weapons and tools. Eagleclaw limped toward the largest lodge, supported by his tribesmen. "He is more than warrior," explained the elder called Singing Wolf. "He speaks for peace, tries to make treaty with white soldiers." Anne's heart sank as she realized the magnitude of what Eagleclaw had been attempting when he was wounded. Strong Wind, the tribal chief, emerged from his lodge with dignity befitting his position. His silver hair braided with feathers, his presence commanded respect. "White daughter," he said formally, "you have shown great courage. Eagleclaw tells us you saved his life when death circled close." Anne felt humbled by his words. "Any decent person would have done the same," she replied. Strong Wind smiled slightly. "Decent people are rare in these dark times. You will always have a place among the Apache." The honor moved Anne to tears. That evening, disturbing news arrived with exhausted scouts. "Colonel Blake rides from Fort Carson," reported a young warrior called Black Eagle. "His soldiers seek to clear all Apache from this territory. They show no mercy." The camp fell silent as the implications sank in. Anne watched Eagleclaw's face harden with determination. "I must try once more," he said quietly. "There are good soldiers, like Colonel Stanley at Fort Lewis. Perhaps he will listen to reason." Strong Wind nodded gravely. "Time grows short, my son. If you go, take the white daughter. Her voice carries weight." Anne remained in the Apache camp, helping Singing Wolf tend to Eagleclaw's healing wounds. The old shaman taught her traditional remedies using desert plants and sacred herbs. "Your medicine and ours together make him strong," he said approvingly. Anne found herself learning Apache words while young tribal members practiced their English with her. The children giggled at her pronunciation, but their patience was endless. Despite the looming danger, these moments of connection felt precious and pure in a world increasingly divided by fear and hatred. Black Eagle, whose own family had perished in a recent army raid, became Anne's guide through camp life. His eyes held deep pain, but his voice remained steady as he explained Eagleclaw's mission. "He goes to white soldiers, tries to make peace treaty, says there is good path for both peoples." Anne listened intently, understanding now why Eagleclaw had been wounded. Someone didn't want peace. "There are good men among the soldiers," she said. "Colonel Stanley at Fort Lewis has reputation for fairness." Black Eagle nodded grimly. "Time runs short to find such men." As evening approached, urgent messengers arrived with devastating news. A young scout, his horse lathered with sweat, collapsed near the fire. "Colonel Blake's regiment rides hard toward our lands," he gasped. "They carry orders to clear all Apache from territory. No prisoners, no mercy." The camp erupted in controlled chaos as warriors prepared for war while women gathered precious belongings. Strong Wind called for counsel, his weathered face grave. "We must choose, fight and die, or flee and live as hunted animals." The choice seemed impossible, but Anne felt an idea forming. That night, Anne proposed her desperate plan to the assembled council. "Let me ride to Fort Lewis," she said. "Colonel Stanley knows my family's reputation for fairness. If I carry Strong Wind's message of peace, written in Eagleclaw's hand, perhaps he will intervene." The warriors debated fiercely, some calling her plan foolish, others seeing it as their only hope. Strong Wind finally spoke. White Daughter offers her life for our people. This is true courage. Eagle Claw, despite his injuries, insisted on writing the letter himself. Dawn would bring her perilous journey to save them all. Before dawn, Anne mounted her horse Copper, carrying Strong Wind's peace message written in Eagle Claw's careful English script. The letter pleaded for understanding, emphasizing the tribe's desire for coexistence rather than conflict. "Ride like the wind, sister," Black Eagle whispered, pressing a small medicine pouch into her hands. "Our prayers go with you." Anne spurred her horse toward Fort Lewis, knowing that Blake's soldiers were already marching toward the hidden valley. The race against time had begun, and failure meant the destruction of everything she had come to cherish. The journey to Fort Lewis stretched nearly 2 days across treacherous terrain. Anne traveled mostly at night, using moon shadows to hide from military patrols that crisscrossed the region. During daylight hours, she rested in hidden canyons and rocky outcroppings, her nerves frayed by every distant sound. Copper's hooves ate up the miles, but Anne knew that somewhere behind them, Blake's column was advancing toward the Apache camp. Time was slipping away like sand through her fingers, and desperation drove her forward through sheer determination. Fort Lewis rose from the prairie like a wooden fortress, its walls bristling with sentries and cannon. Anne's heart pounded as she approached the main gate, knowing that everything depended on the next few minutes. "I must speak with Colonel Stanley immediately," she told the guard, her voice hoarse from the hard ride. "It's a matter of life and death." The soldier looked skeptical until Anne mentioned her family name. "Turner from the Arkansas Valley? Your pa's the one who treats Indians fair?" When Anne nodded, he grudgingly agreed to fetch the colonel. Colonel Robert Stanley emerged from his office, a tall man with kind eyes and graying temples. Anne thrust Strong Wind's letter into his hands, explaining the situation in rapid, breathless sentences. Stanley read the carefully written plea, his expression growing grave. "Blake received orders to clear the territory," he said slowly. "But this letter? If these Apache truly seek peace?" Anne pressed her advantage. "They saved my life, Colonel. They want only to live in harmony." Stanley studied her face, then made his decision. "Telegraph operator," he barked. "Send immediate orders to Colonel Blake. Halt all operations pending my arrival." Anne sagged with relief as the message flew across the wires. Anne rode Copper mercilessly back toward the Apache camp, Colonel Stanley's dispatch clutched in her saddlebag. The return journey was a nightmare of desperate speed and growing dread. As she crested the final ridge overlooking the hidden valley, her worst fears materialized. Blake's blue-uniformed soldiers had formed a battle line at the valley's mouth, rifles gleaming in the morning sun. Across from them, Apache warriors led by Black Eagle stood in defensive formation, protecting their families behind a natural rock barrier. The air crackled with tension, like lightning before a storm. Anne could see Blake himself, a stern man with steel-gray hair, consulting his pocket watch with obvious impatience. His soldiers fidgeted nervously, some barely more than boys who had never faced Apache warriors in battle. On the other side, Black Eagle raised his rifle skyward, the universal signal for parley or surrender. But Blake seemed determined to interpret every gesture as hostile. "Form firing line," he commanded. The metallic click of rifle bolts echoed across the valley like death's own drumbeat. One spark would ignite a massacre that would stain the Colorado earth with innocent blood. Without hesitation, Anne spurred Copper down the steep slope at breakneck speed, her voice rising above the wind. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" she screamed, waving Colonel Stanley's dispatch like a battle flag. Soldiers swung their rifles toward this unexpected interruption while Apache warriors tensed for the attack they thought was coming. Anne rode directly between the two armies, her horse's hooves throwing up clouds of dust. "Colonel Blake!" she shouted. "Orders from Colonel Stanley. You must read this immediately." Blake's face twisted with annoyance at this civilian interference in military matters. Blake snatched the dispatch from Anne's trembling hands, his eyes scanning Stanley's urgent message. His face went pale as he realized the implications. Disobeying a direct order from his superior would end his military career in disgrace. "Stand down," he barked reluctantly to his troops. "Lower your weapons." The soldiers obeyed with visible confusion, while the Apache warriors slowly relaxed their defensive positions. Black Eagle approached cautiously, his rifle pointed toward the ground but ready. "Your words stop the killing, White Sister," he said quietly. Anne slumped in her saddle, exhausted by the emotional toll. The immediate crisis had passed, but true peace remained fragile as morning mist. A week later, Colonel Stanley arrived personally to oversee formal negotiations. The meeting place chosen was symbolic, an ancient oak tree standing alone in the center of the valley, its massive branches providing shade for representatives of both sides. Anne watched as military officers in crisp blue uniforms sat across from Apache leaders in traditional dress. Strong Wind wore his finest ceremonial clothing, while Eagle Claw, now fully recovered, served as translator. The contrast was striking, yet both groups shared the same hope for a peaceful resolution to their differences. Stanley proved to be a fair mediator, listening carefully to both sides' concerns. "The Apache seek only to live in peace on ancestral lands," Eagle Claw translated for Strong Wind. "They offer friendship and trade, not war." Colonel Blake shifted uncomfortably, clearly preferring military solutions to diplomatic ones. Stanley studied the hand-drawn maps spread before them. "These boundaries seem reasonable," he said thoughtfully. "The territory includes good hunting grounds but avoids major settlement areas." The discussions continued for hours, with each side making careful concessions while protecting their essential interests. The negotiations grew tense when discussing past grievances and future security. Some Apache warriors had suffered losses from army raids, while settlers demanded protection from occasional thefts and raids. Anne found herself translating not just words but emotions, helping both sides understand the pain behind their positions. "Revenge only breeds more revenge," she said quietly during one heated exchange. "Both peoples have lost much. Perhaps it's time to build something new instead of fighting over old wounds." Her words carried weight because she had risked everything for peace. After 3 days of careful discussion, Stanley drafted a formal agreement. The Apache would remain in the designated valley territory without military interference for a specified period. In return, they would maintain peace with neighboring settlements and allow safe passage for travelers. Both sides would establish a trading post to encourage beneficial commerce. As the sun set behind the mountains, Strong Wind and Stanley signed the historic document under the old oak's spreading branches. Anne felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Her courage had helped forge a new beginning for two cultures learning to coexist. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, the Apache tribe prepared a sacred ceremony in Anne's honor. Warriors painted their faces with traditional symbols and donned their finest regalia, buckskin decorated with intricate beadwork and eagle feathers that caught the golden light. Women arranged themselves in a circle around the central fire, their voices joining in ancient songs that spoke of courage and friendship. Anne felt overwhelmed by the solemnity of the moment, understanding that she was witnessing something rare and precious in a world increasingly divided by mistrust and fear. Eagle Claw, now standing strong and proud despite his recent wounds, approached the sacred circle carrying a leather pouch. His recovery symbolized the healing that was possible between their peoples. "White Sister," he said formally, "you have shown the heart of true warrior, not in taking life, but in saving it." From the pouch, he withdrew a magnificent eagle claw mounted on braided leather, its surface polished smooth by generations of reverent handling. "This belonged to my grandfather's grandfather," he explained. "It carries the strength of the sky spirits and the wisdom of our ancestors." Strong Wind rose from his place of honor, his voice carrying across the gathering as he spoke in Apache. Black Eagle translated, "The chief says, you have proven that courage knows no boundaries of race or tribe. You risked everything for people you barely knew, asking nothing in return except the chance to do what was right." The eagle claw was placed around Anne's neck with great ceremony, its weight both physical and spiritual. "You are now sister to the Apache people," Strong Wind continued. "Wherever you travel, you carry our protection and our gratitude. Our children will hear your story for generations to come." The ceremony concluded with traditional dances around the flickering fire, the entire tribe celebrating this moment of unity in dark times. Anne participated awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence as the rhythm of drums and chanting voices carried her along. As she danced with her new Apache family under a canopy of stars, she realized that her journey had changed her forever. She had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but acting despite it. Most importantly, she had discovered that compassion and understanding could bridge even the deepest divisions between peoples. Tomorrow, she would return home. But she would never again be the same young woman who had found a wounded stranger by the waterhole.